Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back with some brand new gameplay for you guys, featuring some new and old commanders. So let's hop right into it and see who's playing what. First up, we have Jake playing Nalia d'Arnis. This is an Orzhov party deck that plans on using its commander's ability to get extra creatures on the battlefield to fill up your party, and then using her second ability to buff them up and then kill your opponents. Jake keeps an opening hand of a Plains, a Swamp, Soul Ring, Stick Together, Mindblade Render, Frontline Medic, and Valiant Changeling. Next is Shelby on Animar, Soul of Elements. This is actually a Teamer Mutate deck that plans to mutate on top of Animar to make a really hard to kill and giant creature. Shelby will keep an opening hand of Forest, Rockfall Veil, Scalding Tarn, Simic Signet, Chromatic Lantern, Beastcaller Savant, and Trumpeting Gnar. Up next we have Jason on the pairing of Karlach and Raised by Giants. This deck is pretty simple. It is a Gruul big hit extra combat deck that uses Karlach's ability to get the first extra combat and Raised by Giants to make Karlach huge to potentially one-shot someone. Keeps an opening hand of Mana Confluence, City of Brass, Utopia Sprawl, Professional Facebreaker, Eternal Witness, Beast Whisperer, and Kamal, part of Krosa. Now, last but not least, we have Logan on Zangief the Red Cyclone. This is a Fight Club deck that plans on abusing Zangief's ability to make his opponent sacrifice permanents after he fights creatures with Zangief. He keeps an opening hand of a Forest, a Verdant Catacombs, Rampant Growth, Ignoble Hierarch, Deathrite Shaman, Professional Facebreaker, and Toski, Bearer of Secrets. We're about to hop right into the gameplay, but before we do that, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out all of our links. We post every week, we post our podcast every other week, and we stream every weekend. Speaking of which, this video was actually recorded during a stream, so be sure to check them out. And don't forget to check out the deck list links too. Also, we're running a giveaway right now, so if you're interested in any SmoothBrainEDH sleeves, mats, or deck boxes, and also some free Dragon Shield merch, be sure to check out that link. Speaking of Dragon Shield, they are the sponsor of today's video, so thank you so much to those over at Dragon Shield. And also, if you're looking to pick up any Dragon Shield product, be sure to click our affiliate link down below. But guys, that is enough talk, let's hop right into this gameplay. Looks like Shelby wins the die roll. He'll play and crack his Scalding Tarn for a Ketria Triumph and then pass to Jason. Jason mana confluences and then passes to Logan. Logan will play Verdant Catacombs and immediately crack it for a Taiga, and then he'll cast Ignoble Hierarch. The turn is then passed to Jake, who swamps into Soul Ring and then passes to Shelby. Shelby will then play a Snow-Covered Forest, then tap for 2 to cast Simic Signet. He passes the turn to Jason, who plays City of Pass. Now on Logan's turn, he'll play a Forest's Land for a turn, and then he'll cast his Deathrite Shaman. After this, he'll tap for another 2 and cast Rampant Growth. He passes to Jake after declaring he's going to find a swamp to the battlefield tapped, and Jake will start off with a basic Plains. He then casts Frontline Medic, and then passes the turn to Shelby, who plays his Rockfall Veil as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 3 to cast Chromatic Lantern. After this, he'll cast Farseek, finding a Taiga to the battlefield tapped, and then he'll pass the turn to Jason, who unfortunately misses his third land drop and doesn't have any 2-drops in hand, so he just has to pass the turn and discard a Krenko. The turn is now Logan's, and he plays a Forest's Land for turn. He'll then tap that Forest to cast an Ulvenwald Tracker, and then he taps for 4 to cast Toski, Bearer of Secrets. He then moves to combat, and he'll swing for 2 at Jason because of Exalted to draw a card. And then after this, the turn is passed to Jake, who decides to just cast his commander. He still has 1 left floating from his Soul Ring, so he plays Castle Lochthwain and taps it for a black to cast Mindblade Render. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 3 at Shelby. Then he'll pass the turn to Shelby, who plays another basic Forest as land for turn, and then he decides it's time to cast his commander. He'll then cast Beastcaller Savant and get an Animar trigger. He'll then tap it for a green to cast a Gladecover Scout, getting Animar another trigger. He then passes the turn to Jason, and I am happy to announce he finds an Ancient Tomb. He'll then tap for 3 to cast a Reckless Stormseeker, bolting himself in the process. Jason then moves to combat and has the Stormseeker buff itself, and then he'll swing for 3 at Shelby, who doesn't block it, and then Jason will pass the turn to Logan. Logan starts off with an Exotic Orchard as land for turn, and then he'll free cast a Jeweled Lotus. He then sacrifices the Jeweled Lotus for 3 mana, and then taps for an additional 2 to cast Zangief. He then activates his Ulvenwald Tracker to make Zangief fight the Beastcaller Savant. It'll resolve, and Zangief will trigger, and Shelby sacrifices his Simic Signet. Then after this, Logan will tap for 1 to cast Blizzard Brawl, targeting Zangief and the Mindblade Render. It'll resolve, and Jake has to sacrifice his Soul Ring. After this, Logan moves to combat, and he swings Toski at Jason, Exalted trigger, so Jason takes 2, and Logan draws a card. The turn is then passed to Jake, who plays a Swamp as land for a turn. Then, using his commander's ability, he casts a Harper Recruiter from the top of his library. And then he'll pass the turn to Shelby. Shelby will start his turn by casting Balagate Recovery to get Beastcaller Savant back to his hand, and then he'll pay 1 to cast it, triggering Animar. Then, thanks to Animar's cost-reducing ability, Shelby will mutate Trumpeting Gnar on top of his Gladecover Scout. He'll get another Animar trigger, and he'll get to create a 3/3 beast. After this, he moves to combat and swings for 5 at Logan with Animar, who just takes the damage. After this, the turn is passed to Jason. Jason will then cast his Professional Facebreaker, and then politely ask Jake and Shelby to let his creatures through so he can make 2 treasures to potentially deal with Logan on a later turn. They both agree, and then Jason will move to combat, giving the Stormseeker trigger to the Facebreaker, and then swinging it at Jake, and then the Stormseeker at Shelby. They both don't block, and then Jason will get 2 treasures. And then the turn is passed to Logan, who stops on end step to activate Deathrite Shaman, exiling Shelby's Balagad Recovery to make all of his opponents lose 2 life. And now in his turn, Logan will play another Forest as land for turn. And then he'll cast his own Professional Facebreaker. He'll then activate his tracker again, having Zangief fight Jason's Facebreaker. The ability resolves, and Jason has to sacrifice a treasure. After this, Logan moves to combat, swinging Zangief at Shelby, and then Toski at Jason. Shelby has to block, so he puts Beastcaller Savant under Zangief, and sacrifices his Chromatic Lantern. Jason just takes the 1, and then Logan will draw a card and make a treasure. He'll then just pass the turn to Jake. And Jake will start off by playing Immutable. He then pays 3 mana to cast Grim Haruspex from the top of his library, and with this, he has achieved a party, so he'll move to combat and put a 1/1 counter on each of them. He'll turn everything sideways at Logan, and he has 2 attack triggers. Frontline Medic will make the attacking creatures indestructible, and then Harper Recruiter will find him a Zulaport Cutthroat to his hand. Damage then goes through. He then casts said Cutthroat, and then passes the turn. Now in Shelby's turn, he moves straight to combat and swings for 5 at Logan again. Logan will block with his Hierarch, but before damage, he'll tap it for a mana and then activate his Deathrite Shaman, exiling Facebreaker from Jason's yard, and he'll gain 2 life. Shelby will then pass the turn to Jason, and day becomes night. And Jason starts off by tapping for 4, sacrificing his treasure, losing 4 life, and dropping Terror of the Peaks. Jason then moves to combat, gives the buff to the Terror of the Peaks, and then turns 10 damage sideways at Logan. Logan takes the 10, and then the turn is passed to him. He'll then immediately move to combat and swing everything except his Deathrite Shaman at Jason, who just has to take the 11 damage. Logan will get a treasure from this and then draw 4 cards. After this, he'll activate Deathrite Shaman to exile Krenko and gain 2 life. Logan then counts out the amount of creatures, then pays 1 red to cast Blasphemous Act. It resolves, leaving only Zangief and Toski, and then Jake has 4 Grim Haruspex triggers and 5 Zulaport Cutthroat triggers. Post-combat, Logan will play Cinderglade as land for turn. He'll then cast Birds of Paradise and Lizard Blades, and then he'll reconfigure them onto Zangief. And then after this, the turn is passed to Jake, who starts off by paying 4 to dash out a Mardu Strike Leader. Oh yeah, it's also daytime now. He'll then swing it at Logan, creating a 2/1 warrior, and Logan just takes the 3 damage. Before combat's over, Shelby casts Veil of Summer to draw a card. Then in post-combat, Jake plays Windbrisk Heights to hide away a card, and then he'll move to end step, bouncing his Strike Leader back to his hand. The turn is now Shelby's, and he'll play a Command Tower as land for turn. He then casts Glowstone Recluse, and then just passes the turn to Jason, who starts off with a Kessig Wolf Run as land for turn. He'll then cast Eternal Witness, returning Stormseeker back to his hand. He'll then just pass the turn to Logan, who starts off by Bajuka-Bogging Jake. Logan will then cast Colony Ambush, having Zangief fight Eternal Witness. Logan will then swing for 1 with Toski at Jake, and then Zangief at Jason, potentially killing him. Shelby, however, has compassion in his heart, and taps for 2 to Baby Rift the Zangief back to Logan's hand, saying that Jason owes him 1. Post-combat, Logan decides to just recast Zangief. Then he pays 2 mana to reconfigure the blades back on him. Jake then decides to respond by casting Swords to Plowshares on Zangief. Poor Logan isn't allowed to have his Red Cyclone, so he'll just pass the turn to Jake, who starts off with a basic Plains as land for turn. He'll then pay 1 with Mutavault to animate itself, and then he'll tap for 2 white to cast his Valiant Changeling for only 2 white mana. He'll then cast a Squad Commander, and upon entering the battlefield, he'll make 3 1/1 creature tokens. And then after this, he'll just pass the turn to Shelby, who will recast Animar, and then will pass the turn to Jason. And Jason will play Spire Garden as land for turn. He then taps out, losing 4 life, and drops Kogla the Titan Ape. And upon it entering the battlefield, he'll have it fight the Lizard Blades. The turn is then just passed to Logan, and he plays a Luxury Suite as land for turn. Zangief will then be recast, and then Logan will cast Savage Smash, having Zangief fight Kogla, and this will leave Jason with no blockers. Logan will then move to combat, and he swings Toski at Jason, dealing 1 damage, killing him, and drawing a card. The turn is then passed to Jake, who will recast his commander, Nalia. And then thanks to Nalia, he gets to cast Magus of the Balance off the top of his library, which gives him a full party. So he moves to combat, Nalia and his squad commander will trigger, giving +1/+1 counters all around, and +1/+0 and indestructible all around. He then turns everything sideways at Logan, which is a total of 27 damage. And after some quick math, Logan sees that even blocking the double striker, he still dies, so he is dead. After this, the turn is passed to Shelby, who starts off with a Ponder. And after looking at the top 3, he gives his deck a good shuffle, and then decides to Chaos Warp Jake's squad commander. And after a good shuffle, the revealed card is another swamp. With nothing else left to do, Shelby will pass the turn to Jake. And Jake will start off by casting Lysel. He'll then move to combat, and his commander will trigger, and thanks to Lysel, they will each get 2 +1/+1 counters now. Jake will then turn everything sideways that he can at Shelby for a total of 40 damage. Shelby gladly puts Animar under the double striker, and then he'll put his spider underneath Jake's commander. This will soak up 18 damage, so Shelby will live at 2. Jake then passes the turn to Shelby, who's praying for a board wipe on the top of his library. However, his deck is not so kind, and the top card is Dockside Extortionist. And so, with no way to get out of this situation, Shelby will concede. Congrats, Jake, on the win! Well, everyone, there you have it. Let us know what you thought down in the comments below. I personally really enjoyed watching this game. A lot of people got to do a lot of powerful things, and that's pretty fun if you ask me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Leave us a comment down below, and let us know what you thought. And while you're down there, don't forget to check out our links, especially that giveaway one if you want some free magic stuff. But that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the game. I'll see you next week. Have a smooth day.